Thank you for being here. And yeah, we're going to talk more about MCP, right? So my name is Johannes. I work for Redpanda Data in our cloud team. A few words about Redpanda Data. So yeah, we run a Kafka-compatible streaming engine written in C++. And of course, we have a cloud offering, multi-tenant SaaS, like with dedicated and bring your own cloud deployment, which is like lots of infra plumbing. Dynamically, and also we have like serverless offering, right? And we have APIs, right? And our customers are of course engineers, and they shall call our APIs. And yeah, we want to make it available to LLMs as well. So that's what I talk about. So yeah, quickly about the agenda. So yeah, I'm gonna do like basically a deep dive on MCP, right? What is MCP and why is it useful? Like there's some overlap, but there's also some new things, yeah, compared to the previous talk. Explaining in depth how does MCP tool calling work, right? And of course, like the same question, right? How can gRPC help? So it can definitely help. And since we're all fans of gRPC here, we will see more of that. And then, yeah, I will introduce Protoc-gen-go-mcp, which is a Protoc plugin that today can translate from MCP to gRPC. We're going to talk about some of the pitfalls, like LLM compatibility, right? So there's like a few things you have to keep in mind. We're going to see a small demo about the thing in action. And we'll also talk about, what are the learnings and some future work that is coming up. So of course, like what is MCP and why is it useful? So to start from the ground up, LLMs, they only know what they've been trained on, right? So like they got lots of training and they know certain things from their training, and in addition what they have in their context window, so your prompt and message history. That's all, right? They can't do anything, right? They can't search the web, call APIs, perform file system operations like execute shell commands. Like they can't perform actions. They can't, right? But of course, like Cursor and Claude Code can do this stuff. So how do they do it? Let's look into that. So they have a concept of tool calling, right? We just spoke about tools. And disclaimer, this talk is about MCP, but you might not need MCP to do tool calling, right? So generally, tool calling is just function calling. And it's like everyone talks about MCP. And if you go to LinkedIn, it's like, oh, it's MCP and everything. But you can also just do it with normal functions in your programming language, right? We will still go deeply into MCP. But generally, this is how it works. You have a function, right? The actual implementation, get current temperature. That's your code that gets the temperature, like call an API or have this information at hand. And then you have the function schema, and that's like JSON schema, right? Like the types of the fields and all that. And then you call the LLM, right? With the prompt, what's the temperature, and you send with every request you send to the LLM, you send like the prompt, right? And also the definition of every tool you have. And then the LLM, it thinks, right? Oh, the question is, what's the temperature in London? And it will say, either it will decide based on my training, I can answer this question. Well, probably not. That's just not possible, right? Unless it's what trained today. It will decide, OK, I do a function call, right? A tool call, right? So the response will then say, yeah, please do a tool call. And then you literally do, if the response has an instruction to call the tool get temperature, you call it in your programming language, right? So this works without MCP and has been done for a while. But of course, this talk is about MCP. So yeah, why is it useful? So to just cite the spec, MCP is an open protocol that standardizes how applications provide context to large language models. And I would add, and to perform actions, right? So the standardization is the important part here. So yeah, schema definition, of course, is part of MCP. That's not news. We just saw schema definition in JSON schema, right? That's not new. It's pluggable, right? So it's like a client server. So you can actually write an application, package it, right? Package it in a distribution, and then give it to someone. So if you're like a SaaS vendor, right? You want to have your MCP server and people like your customers to use it. So like this whole distribution marketplaces, like there's websites that allow you to browse MCP servers and pick one, right? So like all this stuff is like solved by MCP. And yeah, that's basically how you can make money with that. And of course, like transport, right? So it standardizes transport, but it's not pluggable. I completely agree with that. I'm also not very happy with the transports we have. So we have the standard I/O, right? It's actually pretty cool. It's like LSP, right? You spawn a subprocessor and talk to it. It's like very easy to use, and we also use that a lot. And then the HTTP one, which is already the second HTTP protocol they support, and the other one was deprecated. And yeah, definitely looking forward to gRPC transport. Yeah, and I already spoke about the packaging and distribution. So I will now explain how it actually works, right? So in depth. So I have a client. The client is Claude Code, for example, like or Cursor, or like any like agentic application that talks on LLM and to do agentic stuff. So first off, it requests what are the tools available. So it talks to the MCP server and says, hey, list me the tools. And then yeah, the answer is, these are the tools, like very similar to what we've seen before from the Python snippet, right? Next step. I have a prompt, right? What's the weather in SF? So the client, so Claude Code, for example, or Cursor, it sends like the prompt. It includes also the definition of all the tools available, sends it to the LLM. Now, the LLM has, again, the choice. Do I do a tool call or do I answer it directly, right? And yeah, okay, the LLM decides, oh, SF, I think that means San Francisco. Let's do a function call for the city, San Francisco. Now, you have to do the tool call, right? So you just got like the request from the LLM, please do a tool call. The LLM itself can't call anything, right? It can just ask you to call it. So the client will now do the tool call. With get weather for San Francisco, and it sends it to the MCP server. And yeah, you get the answer. I mean, I made this up, like temperature 22, and it's like rainy, right? And that's not the end. The last step is the client, again, passes it to the LLM, another round trip. It sends it, the information, the output from the tool call. So you can see it here. Role tool, so that says this doesn't come from the user, but it comes from the tool, right? And yeah, then the response. And then the LLM sees all of this. Hey, they asked for the weather, and there's the tool call suggested from like the LLM, and then the tool call response was that. Okay, I'm gonna answer it with a sentence. It's 22 degrees and rainy in San Francisco. You should bring an umbrella. So like that's like the entire thing. And it kind of also explains why this stuff is like, it's like slow, right? Every interaction with the LLM takes a lot of time. Yeah, so this was like tool calling in a nutshell. Now, we're here at gRPC-conf, so how can gRPC help? And this is like subjective, right? So one of my motivations is keeping Protobuf as the authoritative IDL, right? So we love Protos, right? Can we agree on that? Does someone hate Protos? No. Okay.
Depends on my mood.
Depends on your mood. Which edition? Okay. So yeah, we love Protobufs, and like we have a vast ecosystem, right? We have like cool stuff like Proto-validate, like the cell expressions, and also at Redpanda we have lots of in-house tooling, like Proto-C plugins that that do like use cell expressions to extract certain fields and do like RBAC, like wire up a lot of stuff, like really cool things you can like build across teams, like cross-cutting concerns, like all this ecosystem, right? And I don't want to throw that away for just another protocol that is like not even a year old, right? And had 2 transports so far, and 1 is deprecated. So that's the thing. And of course, like high quality APIs are really, 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 really important. So like quality is king. Like human users, they are really picky, but they might put up with some BS basically. But the LLMs, they will get confused or might do things you don't like. Like high quality is so important, good errors, etc. So And we know how to do that, right? Like with gRPC, we have the best practices. We have super good resources from Google, like the AIP, like resources like about code style, and also from Buff, really good resources, and like generate resource-based APIs and all the semantics that come with that, incremental like updating with patch calls, etc. So that is really important, and we want to keep that. And yeah, no duplicated work. So we're not going to spend any time maintaining another protocol or copy of our API, but we just want it to work. So yeah, then now the pitch. Enter Protoc-gen-go-mcp. We generate MCP tool specs from the RPC definitions, right? So we take your protos, we generate the MCP tool specs, and it's minimal effort to maintain it, right? Actually, you have to do nothing, and you just generate your stuff. I will show you. We support only Go because we're a Go shop in Redpanda Cloud, and yeah, it's like open source. And yeah, we try to play great with the ecosystem, right? So we love Protos and our ecosystem. So things like, field behavior, right? Like that's like standard, like such things. We support that and translate that in terms of schema as well. So how does it work? You might use your Buff YAML, for example. Buff generate YAML to just drop in this Proto plugin, right? You can do it with Go Run. You don't have to install anything. And then if you have like a test service, right? It's from the tool's tests, to be honest. So if you have this service definition, what does it do? And like I had to cut out a few lines, of course. It creates a new package. So follows like this, kind of best practice to have like a second package if you create the your own plugin, and it like imports like the main package for the generated types, and then you get a tool definition for each RPC, and then a bunch of register functions, and that looks familiar, like gRPC gateway basically, right? You have like you wire up the MCP server with your handler, for example, right? And in between, like the translation happens. We have a small runtime package as well. And then there's also other like functions to kind of, you can wire it up with like a in process, like the handler, right? But you can also wire it up with a client, so it can actually like receive the MCP request and then talk to like some remote server, or even do that with connect RPC. So like you can choose. And yeah, in your own application, like in the main, basically, how does it look like? You spin up an MCP server. You register then, like you call these register functions or the forward functions, and then you start the server. That's it. Like just the translation happens is done by the generated code and like the runtime package that is called by the generated code. So yeah, we have a small video. Let me try to find my mouse to actually click. And it's like a small speed up, so you're not getting bored while the LLM is working. So this is like in Redpanda Cloud. We have resource groups. So please find like my clusters in my resource group, right? And it's kind of, okay, like the LLM understands, okay, I have to do list resource groups, right? And then, okay, I have to list the clusters within the resource group. Okay, and then it finds the clusters. I want to create a serverless cluster, right? Okay, please do it in the US and on GCP, right? The LLM, okay, it knows the schema, and of course it fills out. It is smart enough to like use the list serverless regions, right? Because it needs it to construct the next call. And now, yeah, the cluster was created. Yeah. So like API quality is really important, so it can figure out that stuff, right? You want to outsource the thinking to the LLM. And now, yeah, like check if it's ready. It's ready. And then I asked it to create a Kafka topic, basically a Redpanda topic. And yeah, it did it. I just told it, retention 3 days, replication factor. It has been created. Awesome. And last question is, how can I connect to it? Like, of course, like this is not a pitch for Claude Code, but generally you get the idea, right? Like you can outsource so much of the thinking and build like a lot of user experience around this. So now on to the next. No, not again. Okay. LLM compatibility is really tricky. So generally, LLM APIs, they are similar, but Claude supports almost all of JSON schema, so it works almost perfectly. However, there's also other LLM providers, OpenAI, for example. It doesn't support one of and any of, and you need like a combo of one of and any of to express a protobuf one of. So that doesn't work. What you can do is like we put a hint, we add like each of as an optional field, and then we add a comment, pick only one of these, right? It's not great, but it's like probabilistic. Probably LLM will honor it, maybe not. And all fields must be required in OpenAI. That's a really funny one. So you must mark all fields in OpenAI as required. But if you want to have it optional, you can define the type as a union of the type and null. Yeah, you could do that. Like we have workarounds for that in the library, so it works. Dynamic maps are not supported on OpenAI. I think on Gemini, but I didn't recheck in the last weeks. So yeah, and you can do some trickery. Instead of a map, you do an array of key value pairs, right? So yeah, you can do a few things. And recursive schemas, as like they don't work in so many places, Iceberg, and yeah, we have to fall back to string basically, which is really sad. And I think a better solution is possible, but yeah, I was cheap. Maximum nesting, OpenAI allows only a nesting level of 6, which works for our APIs. But I know people who have like much deeper nesting, so you have to cut off at some point and do a string or so. And again, like this is really my key message. Rich APIs, errors are extremely important for LLMs, right? So you have to validate rigorously, follow the best practices, read AIPs and honor them like where it makes sense, and yeah, use error details as much as you can. Yeah, and future work. So there's of course a lot to do. So proto-validate, we can use some proto-validate rules and pull them up in the JSON schema. For example, we could look, does the proto-validate have a regex? And then we use that regex and put it in the JSON schema. That's, for example, something we don't do yet. Yeah. Custom option. So we don't have that, and that's what was requested by a few people. Like skipping a tool or custom tool names. Currently, we use the fully qualified like name of the RPC, which can be really big. And then we do some name mangling, and like it's a bit ugly. So yeah, custom tool names I think would be nice. Custom description, and so like you can customize it a bit more. And maybe custom type mappings. I haven't found a use case, but it was requested, so that might be interesting, especially with these edge cases, so you can like make your own adjustments. Something I'm really interested in, that's like direct gRPC tool calls without MCP, right? Because depending on where you are, if you're like somewhere in like a server application, maybe an AI agent, you can do all these calls to gRPC actually without the detour over MCP. We don't support that yet, but it's just a little bit of plumbing. So that would be really interesting. And yeah, of course, like the classic like interceptor support doesn't work in like if you use forwarded to like a server handler, like in gRPC gateway. So we suffer from the same problems. Yeah, that's it. So yeah, maybe we have a moment for questions.
Hey, yeah, great presentation, first of all. You mentioned that you guys built like a Go binding for this library, right? I'm just wondering, like, is the language binding necessary, or is it possible to build like an MCP like JSON from the protobuf and then pass it directly to the client, for example?
Yeah, I suppose like, yeah, it works only in Go, so you have to bake it in your application. But if you don't use Go, it's like useless for you, right? But what would work is, and I think that's more like the previous approach, is like you have actually a server-side application that does the translation, right? That's the alternative, right? It has to use like reflection or like load the descriptors and do that dynamically. So that's not what we do because it was just not necessary. But yeah, for a more generalistic solution, I think in many cases, that would be a better choice.
That'll work, yeah. So this is for like direct language support and also for the type safety and stuff as well.
Yeah, so if you use Go, I think this works really well. We have, like how we use it is we have a CLI. It's called RPK. Like it's our CLI for all our products. And what we do is we just added a subcommand to serve MCP from that CLI. And since our customers have the CLI available anyway, and the CLI manages also like all the authentication and stuff, it makes for a really good experience because you just you run a command to install the CLI, like the MCP server into your Claude JSON. And then you launch Claude and like can keep going. And all the translation happens in this CLI. And it's like, it doesn't touch anything of the cloud basically because like the cloud gRPC server is there and all the translation happens in the client locally on the machine of the user. And that makes it like super low risk for us to do because it's essentially just like translates it into gRPC calls on the developer's machine.
That's really cool. Yeah, that sounds awesome. Thank you.
Thank you. Does the LLM actually use the tool output JSON schema for like anything? Like if the get weather just returned like a string, like would it be a different result for the call?
That's a very good question. Honestly, I don't know. I think for the LLM, it doesn't make any sense. So the output schema, so this tool doesn't even support output schema, and output schema didn't even exist until 2 months ago. So like generally, MCP has only an input schema, and output is always string. It was kind of bolted on because people said, well, if we have like a protocol, we should have an output schema. But like if you look at it as a gRPC user, you think, okay, we need a request response schema, right? But as like an AI company, they know, okay, the LLM, it accepts text as input in a prompt. So why do we need a schema, right? And the purpose of the thing is just to dump it into the LLM. So I don't know for sure, but I think that output schema makes no sense and is useless for the LLM.
Which maybe that's the thing, what kind of diminishes the gRPC value in this whole thing, because the LLM doesn't care about the structure that much. So maybe that's why Anthropic just doesn't care
for the
so
LLM,
much,
it doesn't matter. It just matters for the people who have already written the backend and have to maintain the backend, basically. Yeah.
Thanks.
Hey, like given a prompt, if there is like multiple tools the LLM can use to solve it, and say, and suppose like one tool is more expensive computationally than the other, so what do you think is a best practice to let the LLM know that, like maybe try a solution that's low cost first instead of going for a more expensive one?
You mean which tool to call?
Yeah.
It's a good question. I think I could just put in a tool description like the information, this RPC, like it's super expensive, right? And it's like prompt engineering basically, I think, if that answers your question. So like, and I also learned like prompt engineering is an actual job, I think. Like, so we use this for pretty sophisticated things like, sorry, it's a small detour from the question. I will get back to that. We have a tool called Redpanda Connect, and you can like write such huge YAMLs to define like data pipelines, like to move data from A to B. And I've written a prompt that makes it basically one shot create these data pipelines based on your input, but you have to give it like a huge prompt to just tell it how to do. Like maybe like something like do not use this kind of input, use this one, in this case use that one. Like all this like knowledge, and also something like this API call is expensive, try to avoid it. I would bake it in there, and then you don't have to write like the business logic, right? You don't have to write the logic to make the right choice, but you rely on the LLM to make the right choice. And I guess like that's the whole promise of agentic AI, right? You outsource business logic to the LLM, and you get like the free lunch we had with the CPUs for a long time. Every year there's a new model, and you get automatically, like in theory, better decisions by the LLM. So yeah, I would just outsource it to the LLM. I think that's like the AI vibe.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.